John Hannam.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I presided at a meeting of the Cabinet and had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today. This evening I hope to have an audience of Her Majesty the Queen.
Hannam.
This is World Environment Day. May I congratulate my right honourable friend on the United Nations award to her as a winner of... Is it not a fact, Mr. Speaker, that my right honourable friend's recent decision to limit CO2 emissions in the year 2005 to the present levels will represent something like a 30% reduction in CO2 emissions from the projected levels? And will this not mean substantial sacrifices by energy consumers?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am grateful to my honourable friend. Of course, I welcome the award as a recognition of the lead which this government has taken on environmental matters. We have put forward a target time of the year 2005 so that we can get down the CO2 emissions during that year to where they are this year. It is a realistic target and one which I think will become a world consensus. I'm very glad that the chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has endorsed that as a realistic target and believes in the 15 years' time we should have very much better science on which to make further decisions.
Neil Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister appreciate that she spoke for the whole country recently when she said that the poll tax had been a huge mistake?
But the right honourable gentleman is mistaken. I never said any such thing. I'm very sorry to disappoint him, but he shouldn't believe everything he reads in the newspapers.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sad that the reports that there was some common sense breaking out in Downing Street appear to have been slightly exaggerated. Is the Prime Minister aware that the costs of administering poll tax are huge? Is she aware that in many areas there is chaos in the collection of poll tax? And does she appreciate that poll tax capping will inflict crippling losses, especially on children's education? When all those things are true, isn't it obvious that the only thing wrong with this saying that poll tax is a huge mistake is that it's a gross understatement?
But the right honourable gentleman never conditions his supplementary questions to my previous replies. I admitted it happened. Perhaps that is beyond his capacity to think on his feet. With regard to the collection of community charge, the right honourable gentleman and his advisers will be aware that we did accelerate the taxpayers' contribution, the rate support grant, to local authorities so that they got virtually 3 months in place of the 2 months which otherwise they would have got, which gives them a very considerable advantage in cash terms, so that if they put it on deposit, they have a very good extra amount to tide them over any difficulties.
Perhaps the Prime Minister will condition herself to this reality, that all over the country, people under Conservative councils and Labour councils are saying this poll tax is costing us much more than the rates ever did. Where's the sense? Where's the prudence? Where's the fairness in that? Isn't it clear, Mr. Speaker, isn't it clear that such a tax is doomed and it deserves to be, along with the government that invented it?
Of course, I understand that the right honourable gentleman feels strongly about the community charge, especially as he lives in Ealing. Where, of course, having had a Labour council, they had a very high community charge. But who is the right honourable gentleman to talk? We looked at the Labour Party's document only as we'd heard that Labour's Director of Campaigns and Communications promised on the 4th of April that the next major policy statement by the Labour Party will be on the 23rd, 24th of May, which we got. it will contain our fully worked out alternative to the poll tax. And what did we get when we found that? A list of principles followed by this statement. The practical means by which we achieve these aims and principles are set out in a background paper. There's no background paper. The Labour Party haven't a clue.
Sir Bernard Bray.
Speaker, is my right honourable friend yet aware of the astonishment and the dismay of right honourable and honourable members on both sides of this House at the decision of the unelected chamber to reject the Four Times bill? Would you bear in mind that Australia, Canada and the United States, three countries that have legal systems not dissimilar to our own and don't take second place to us in regard to human rights, have all legislated now long ago? And will she weigh very carefully in coming to any decision on this grave matter the words are the conclusion reached by the Hetherington-Chalmers report that to take no action against such monstrous crimes would taint, I'm quoting, would taint the United Kingdom.
The Father House mustn't do that. Paraphrase, please.
Would taint the United Kingdom with the slur of becoming a haven for war criminals. Is it not clear, Mr. Speaker, that the only moral conclusion to be reached is that the bill must be introduced in another session?
Mr. Speaker, I recognise, of course, the extremely strong feelings because of the hideous nature of these crimes. We will be considering very carefully the implications of the result of the debate in another place and consider how best to proceed, bearing in mind the size of the majority in this House on a free vote. It may be that the House itself will wish to discuss this matter, in which case I'm sure they'll pursue that through my right honourable friend, the Lord President.
George Howarth. Number 2. Long last.
The honourable gentleman to reply which I gave some moments ago.
Howarth.
Is the Prime Minister aware, Mr. Speaker, that her government is presiding over record levels of homelessness, high mortgage costs, high rent increases, and the complete collapse of the private rented sector? What's she going to do about it?
Mr. Speaker, the government is also presiding over a record number of homes in this country. With regard to homelessness, the honourable gentleman is aware that very considerable proposals and money have been allocated to reducing homelessness. It was recently announced that a sum of £250 million was to be devoted to this, and also very considerable increases in the money in the next 2 years, from £985 million to £1,700 million to housing corporations and housing associations in order to build more houses suitable for these and other people.
Mr. Kenneth Hind.
Number 3.
I refer my honourable friend to reply which I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Hind.
My right honourable friend will be aware of the success of inward investment in Britain. She's no doubt noted that 41% of American investment in Europe comes to Britain and 38% of Japanese investment. Does she not agree that if the Labour Party put the unions back in the saddle, overtax enterprise and increase public expenditure, Britain, this inward investment will end and Britain will become the sick man of Europe, as indeed it was in 1979.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend that we have a record amount of inward investment in the community coming to this country, both from the United States and from Japan and other areas. The part of the reason they come is because of the kind of free enterprise economy we run in this country, and also our most excellent record of enterprise and in production and manufacturing investment. We welcome them. All of those things would go were the Labour Party ever to put into practice their policy document their policy document, which goes back to the failed policies of the past.
Ashdown.
Does the Prime Minister agree with the views of Hans-Dietrich Genscher, the West German foreign minister, who said that NATO is going to have to change and evolve in order to become the keystone of a new pan-European defence structure? If the long-term stability and security of Europe is to be maintained, does she agree with these very sensible views?
Mr. Speaker, they're not new or sudden. We have a meeting of foreign ministers of NATO at Turnberry, which I shall be speaking to on Thursday. We also have a NATO summit in this country in June, July, to do just that.
While it would be inappropriate for Her Majesty's government to respond to the illegal action of France in banning British beef imports by a similar illegal action of our own, it is perfectly reasonable for British consumers to use their purchasing power to boycott French goods, including the appalling French Golden Delicious apples.
Mr. Speaker, I understand my honourable friend's very strong feelings, but I must say the Commission have been extremely good and very quick in the action they have taken. It is quite illegal to ban imports from this country to Germany or France. The Commission are taking action, and the Special Veterinary Committee of the community have agreed that Britain has taken all action possible and the British beef is safe.
Eric Ilslip.
Which I gave some moments ago.
Ilslip.
With me that at a time of low teacher morale within the profession and teacher shortages, that it's an absolute tragedy that Barnsley Metropolitan Borough Council is presently having to sack teachers and close its music teaching centre, thereby depriving local children of music teaching, simply as a result of her government's arbitrary and artificial poll tax capping.
No, Mr. Speaker, that is not the cause. It is absolute nonsense. That is not the cause. It's absolute nonsense.
Order.
Authorities such as mine, whose education record is unbeaten, which managed to do it with a low community charge. They manage things very well, the cooperation of their teaching staff and excellent management of a local authority.
Alan Amos. Number 6.
My honourable friend for the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Amos.
Would my right honourable friend note that I had British beef for lunch?
Order. Order. But try and get it in order. I'm not certain that's the Prime Minister's responsibility.
And would she convey the congratulations of my farmers, and would she convey the congratulations of my farmers to the EEC Commission for its prompt action in challenging the illegal bans imposed by certain EEC countries which are based on pure commercial opportunism, and would she confirm that all the independent scientific and medical evidence is that it is perfectly safe to eat British beef? And would she agree with me that the decision by Northumberland County Council to ban beef, which was removed within 2 days, was an utter disgrace?
Mr. Speaker, may I thank my honourable friend for his meaty question. I entirely agree that the Commission has acted quickly in response to this ban because they regard it as totally illegal. I entirely agree with him that the Special Committee of Veterinary Experts attached to the community has approved everything that we have done and taken every possible measure in pursuit of the Southwood and the Tyrrell committees, and the British beef is safe. I agree with him too that those who banned it have done it more as a measure of protection for their own farmers than in fact because of the scientific evidence. I would gladly pass on my honourable friend's congratulations.
P. Smith.
which I gave some moments ago.
I hope she does. I hope she enjoys the rest of her day. I hope also that she has a pleasant night's sleep in a warm bed, Mr. Speaker. Because in this week of National Housing Week, Mr. Speaker, is she aware that it's National Housing Week? And would she like to tell me what she's going to do for those constituents in my area who do not even have a home to go to tonight?
Mr. Speaker, may I point out precisely what has been done? I understand that there are something like 1,000, just over 1,000 people who sometimes sleep out rough in London. Some of them have other problems, such as they're mentally retarded or they have genuine problems and are genuine social cases. Others are not. But during the lifetime of this government, a great many more hostel places have been built, so that we now have more than 21,000 hostel places in London, including some 3,000 emergency cases and direct access beds in London. We have already just allocated and announced another 250... No, Mr. Speaker, they don't like to hear the facts. 250 million pounds to be spent over the next 2 years to provide nearly 15,000 extra lettings, and also the new housing association hostels. We've allocated another 100 million pounds. All of this to help with the problem of the homeless. And in fact, there are far more council flats empty in London than there are homeless on London streets.
Private notice.